Yeah, I'll react to that, sure.
Hi guys. Okay, I haven't done a History Matters video in a while. I think I'm gonna binge a few actually because there's a few I gotta catch up on. And Armchair Historian. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Let's learn. If you are not ready to learn, there's the door. Home ec is down the hall. You're in the wrong class. Phones away. See Napoleon there? Hope you're all doing well. If not, don't worry. Relax. Let's go. Why did the British royal family change its name to the Windsors? Isn't it because of, it was like a German name, and they didn't want to seem... Let's go.
In 1914, when Europe got a bit worse, the British royal family, headed by King George V of the House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, opted to change its name. This change saw the British royal house become that of the House of Windsor. This change of name wasn't so clear-cut and many others were put forth. Which raises the question, why did the British royal family change...
I always gotta read.
Clear-cut and many others...
Ideas for names. Tudor Stuart, Tudor. Plantagenet, Fitzroy. McRoyal Face. That'd be good. Wessex, York, Lancaster, Bonaparte, Stuart.
Were put forth, which raises the question, why did the British royal family change its name? And why did it change its name to Windsor specifically? So, as many of you will know, after World War I kicked off, the British public weren't exactly in a pro-German mood. And as the war continued, this dislike of all things German grew. And given that the British royal family had been German since the Hanoverian dynasty took the throne in 1714, there were some in government that were worried that anti-German...
The reason so many royal families in Europe, not just in Britain, have a lot of German ancestry is because during the Holy Roman Empire, where it was a bunch of different German states, but they had princes that they get princes and princesses to marry, and that if you were British or French or Spanish, you wouldn't want some weird succession scenario down the road to end up with a British person on the French throne or vice versa. And so it was just sort of a safe pick to go with one of the Holy Roman Empire or Germanic states for consorts, I think.
When the Hanoverian dynasty took the throne in 1714, there were some in government that were worried that anti-German sentiment would soon become anti-monarchy sentiment. Which was a fair concern since Britain's first Sea Lord, the Austrian Prince Louis of Battenberg, was forced to resign when the war kicked off. In 1917, after the Russian Emperor was made unemployed, British Prime Minister David Lloyd George urged the king to do two things. 1. Renounce his German and Austrian titles, and 2. Change the family name to something more British.
I have to.
The king didn't want
Wallingsbury, Jodlesworth, Jeswowza, Chesterfield, Millsby, Farting upon Bane, Wallops Cod, Drunken Disorderly, Lilliesbury, McDougall, Von Habsburg, Lanfair, William Gogogoch, Ellisworth, Cumberbatch.
Want to do this because royal houses weren't something that you would traditionally rename on a whim.
Napoleon
but he
III.
didn't want to get himself sarred, so he reluctantly agreed. King George personally wanted to take the name Stuart, to emphasise continuity with the last non-German. King George personally wanted to take the name Stuart, to emphasise continuity with the last non-German royal house. Lloyd George said no because picking the name of a house that was overthrown and also one whose descendants pressed their claim on the throne during times of war was a bad look. As such, Lloyd George called up all of the previous living Liberal Prime Ministers to come up with a new name to get the king to agree. The first was Tudor, which was vetoed by the king since he felt that it was associated with head-slicing, religious turmoil and despotism. Plantagenet was rejected for being too French, whereas York and Lancaster were denied because of their association with civil war and insecure rule. So why treated with
I'm rewinding.
head-slicing, religious turmoil and despotism. Plantagenet was rejected for being too French, whereas York and Lancaster were denied because of their association with civil war and insecure rule. So why was Windsor put forward? Well, the name was chosen by the King's private secretary, Lord Arthur Stamfordham. Whilst he and the royal family were staying at Windsor Castle, Stamfordham realised that Windsor was a suitable name for these reasons. First, Windsor Castle had been in the possession of the English and later British royal families for about 700 years at this point. Second, it was also a title of Edward III, who did the most British thing of all. He invaded France. And third, Windsor was an entirely British place with no negative connotations. Lloyd George agreed, and with a bit of encouragement, so did the king. He signed a proclamation declaring that the royal...
Oh, before I read that, I have to ask my question or I'm going to forget it. Oh yeah, my question. So you see this tabard, whatever you want to call it. It's got the French things and then the British lions. Is this a French uniform during like 100 Years Wartime or during the time where Anjou or where England controlled some of France, and so like they believe themselves to have both, and so that's why they wore it? Because to me, it seems like someone who's wearing this, it's like you're like, what are two British rivals in soccer, football? Man City and Man U? Or I don't know. Just imagine Man City and Man U are, oh my God, it's like you're wearing a jersey with two rivals on it. But there is the reason because England was like controlling part of France.
Invaded France. And third, Windsor was an entirely British place with no negative connotations. Lloyd George agreed, and with a bit of encouragement, so did the king. He signed a proclamation declaring that the royal family had adopted the name...
By royal decree, you all keep making us feel bad because of our German heritage. We won't tolerate shaming people for things beyond their control. That said, we can control this, so we've just opted to change our names and erase our family heritage to appease your short-term anger at people who hold Oktoberfest in September. So true. As such, we're no longer the House of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, and now we're the House of Windsor. Deal with no. We're sure purely symbolic change will work, and you'll forget all about this. Signed, King George V. Your grandfather was a devil.
Windsor and the royal family had renounced their German titles and awards, which, for the British people, politicians and newspapers, was enough to convince them that the royal family was no longer German, but was instead a now fundamentally British institution. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and a special thanks to my patrons, James Biz.
Thank you for making... Are people really that, like, naive and short-sighted? Or that like, was this necessary? That it's like, wait, we have a German name. That means you're pro-German. Like, was that necessary? I feel like people should be a bit more nuanced in their knowledge of history to know that, like, this doesn't mean we're supporting Germany. These names are a result of marrying a much less threatening German states. And so, like, were there really people like, wait? Also, thanks, guys. Wait, are we done?
Papers was enough to convince them that the royal family was no longer German, but special thanks to...
And now we are done. I can read. Thanks, guys, for watching.
Papers.
I love the...
family had renounced their German titles
You're
and
a nerd,
awards,
cousin.
which, for the British people, politicians and newspapers...
I love reading the newspapers. You can leave if you want. You're dead to me. Okay. All right. The late afternoon, early evening times. 8th of July, 1917. King invents PR department. People be angry. Her Majesty King George V. Did you hear that burp? I'm sorry. I'm very gassy. His Most Imperial Britannic Majesty has opted to create a new arm of the royal bureaucracy called the PR department. This new department's job is to take care of the facts, is to take things like facts and bend them to make the royal family look better. The goal is to change people's minds with small, largely meaningless concessions. Changing the royal house to Windsor won't actually change anything, but people will lap it up, said PR representative Dave from Bognor. Experts believe that this innovation will sweep the world and will find its way to the halls of every public business institution. Soon, every company will be trying to take bad news and spin it into something less damaging to shareholder confidence. Much to the surprise of observers, those who work in PR publicly somehow manage to get out of bed in the morning without confronting the morally gray area that is their work. Whilst we should all be concerned about the existence of PR, its nastier cousin, HR, Toby, is just around the corner. Clashes in Russian capital. Clashes have broken out in the Russian capital between anti-government protesters and government forces over the constitution of the Great War in the East. Over the continuation of the Great War in the East. Blah. Many were wounded as police officers and soldiers opened fire on demonstrators, with Kentucky. I can't read. With Kerensky stating, "Who knew we just should shoot? Who knew we just should shoot them?" The protests have since dispersed, and most Bolshevik leaders have since been arrested. None of whom are worth mentioning, since obviously their place in history ends here. Lenin, or someone, or am I dumb? The one notable exception was that Vladimir Lenin, who, like a scared impala, bolted for the safety of the Finnish border and away from the scary men and loud noises. He intends to bravely return at some point and hopes everyone will forget about all the fleeing he's done up until now. More on page 2. Income tax still temporary. Lloyd George's government has once again confirmed to the country and media that its flagship income tax remains a temporary measure for the length of the war, and that once the war has ended in a British victory, it will be abolished. Even though we love money, said the Prime Minister, there's no legitimate reason for us to continue taxing people's incomes unless we change our mind, need more money for other wars, or just don't feel like getting rid of it. This is half the fun for these videos, for me. I mean, what are you going to do about it? You're broke now. And also the rates of tax are going up next year, too. While some of you may think this is confirmation of it saying wartime regulations on what we can print mean that we can't agree with you, but it's totally staying. All right, love y'all. Chin up. If you're not doing well, you'll be good soon. Don't worry. If you're doing good, then sucks to be you because you're going to be sucking. Bye, guys. Love y'all.